in it together when it comes to universities policy?
So first of all, a huge thank you for letting me speak today. It's a massive opportunity for us to speak to Liberal Democrats, especially when you're so entrenched in your own policy development processes. When I accepted this request, a note that got passed back to us was, we'd quite like it if you didn't dredge up the issue of fees. Well, it's a bit like asking a bear not to, well, you know. So you won't be surprised that I'll try my best to stay away, but I think there is something about important context of why you're discussing this just now. I mean, you might have detected from the accent, I come from Scotland originally, and one of the things that I thought was a massive shame was the electoral fate of Liberal Democrats in Scotland, mostly because, having worked with Lib Dems in Scotland, they were on the side of students time and time again. And I know there was a whole amongst of other social issues around reaction to coalition, but I don't think education was high up there. And to know that that was the retribution that came, when especially working with people like Margaret Smith, I knew it was certainly not her intention any of this came to bear. I thought that was a shame, and I guess from that, I think it's important that Liberal Democrats do realise that there are past mistakes and there's a future ambitions, and I think it's right that you're talking about your policy going forward in a way that brings students back on side. I'll start with the winners. Part of this fringe was about who are the winners and losers from the system. And there are some winners. I think it's a bit hard to put a drop of vinegar into a pint of water and call it wine, but there are indeed some winners in this system. The government's drive to provide more information for students is absolutely right. Far too long it's been a bit of a blind alley in terms of where students would choose to go, and it's right that government trying to open up more information to students when they're making some of the most life-changing decisions of their life. I think that some of the talk around separation from teaching and examination, if in the right context, is right. So we should be doing far more to allow institutions that already have degree awarding powers to be able to offer to non-traditional routes. So I think it's right that a single parent who cannot afford or want to travel away from their home is able to access a recognised university degree. If we move in that direction, I think that's right and proper. I'm not quite sure that's what David Willits intends, but nonetheless, if that was what we were talking about, that'd be a good thing. And of course, the obvious one in which Liberal Democrats were integral in was the deal for part-time students. And that was right that that playing field was levelled. Albeit with the caveat of what you debated yesterday at your conference, we do need to deal with when part-time students start paying back their contribution. Should certainly not be while they're still studying. But we can deal with that problem. I think we can if there's a willingness, especially from the Liberal Democrat side of the coalition. Going on to losers, well, there's some really perverse effects that I want to highlight of what's come to bear in terms of what the white paper is suggesting. The first one is around the issue of student support, and it's particularly fee waivers. So we have a system at the moment through the National Scholarship Programme, which I would point out is neither national nor based on scholarships. I'm not even quite sure it's a programme, but you know, it has that title. Straitjackets institutions to running towards fee waivers. Now you would be maybe surprised to hear me say that I don't think fee waivers are partial or a good thing. The reason why I don't think they are is the mechanisms of the repayment system. There's a cut-off where all your debt is written off after 30 years. And the modelling would suggest that only actually the highest earners are likely to ever pay off the full amount of their loan before they hit the 30-year threshold. And so offering things like a 1k or a 2k fee waiver is actually fictional to most students. It is a con trick. It is a sleight of hand that makes a student think they are receiving support from government that will never come to bear unless they are the highest of earners, at which case I'd argue they shouldn't be receiving that support. And so actually I think the Liberal Democrats could have a really strong part to play during negotiations around the HE bill to get that money away from fictional fee waivers towards money in students' pockets through bursaries. And that's maybe something we could discuss a bit further. The second one is the issue of early repayment. And I bring this up because this could go to the wrong side of the debate very easily. He'll talk about early repayment as if they want to try and avoid people with a lot of capital behind them avoiding interest accrual. If you pay it off quickly, you won't have as much interest, you get a better deal than someone from a poorer background. Now, that may be the case, although our modelling suggests it's not actually that vast amount of money. The thing we should be focusing on is what happens to those who try to pay off their debt when they shouldn't have to. So if you are someone from a middle to low income and you start putting in a couple of £1,000 every other year, again, because of that 30-year cut-off, that might be fictional money that you were never going to have to pay off in the first place. Now, where this gets really insidious is when the government asserts that that student debt and loans will not have an impact on mortgages. Well, okay, that's fine. If you encourage someone to pay off capital they should have been saving on something that they'll never see a benefit from, how are they going to get on the housing ladder? And so actually this debate should be focused on how you stop early repayment unless it's large amounts of capital. And I think Liberal Democrats again could play a very integral role in taking us to that position. The final part is about what I think would really, really irk most Liberal Democrats is what we've created through the number control system of A-B being unrestricted, so a student with A-B plus grades, any university can take as many as you like, coupled with the removal of 20,000 places from everyone and only being able to access those 20,000 places again if you charge under 7.5k, and we can come back to that if that's not clear because some of this is quite technical stuff now, is that you've practically created the inverse of the pupil premium. What you have done is you have forced those that go to institutions where traditionally they have the most deprived backgrounds to say, I want less money spent on me and my education. Now that is really insidious. That has meant that we are telling people who could benefit the most from education, in fact we have a reverse auction that we purposely say we will spend less on you now. And Liberal Democrats have a contradiction to answer. Do fees put people off from the poorest background? If the answer is no, then stop having variability in fees. The answer is yes, well then we're probably back to more core principles of why Liberal Democrats opposed fees in the first place. Very finally, just to comment on what I think your policy might be going forward. I think there's some short-term wins that I'd hope we'd have Liberal Democrat support on because we won't have it from the Conservative side. Especially around student finance. We need more money in students' pockets. Actually, a lot of what we hear about is it's not necessarily the debt that will cause people to lose out in education. It will be disposable cash while they're studying. If you don't have it, you'll work over 20 hours a week. You'll take on dangerous levels of commercial credit, and you might ultimately drop out. Long term, the reinvestment of public money has to be considered. One of the real horrible parts of this is not reduced public spending. It shifted it off the books, fair enough, but actually this system could cost more in the long run than the old system did. And so we have to think about what is going to be, when we start going through recovery, how do we get money back in? And very finally, if we don't go back to addressing the fundamentals of how we fund the system, which, let me be clear, I think we should. I think fees are wrong. I think we were right when Vince floated graduate tax, and you should go back and be brave enough to go back to that as a party. But if we don't, if that is not something that we can do politically, then you have to deal with variability, because that is the insidious part of the system. It's not actually the amount of money, although I think that's bad. It's the fact that you're forcing people to actively choose, I want less money spent on me, when it has absolutely no bearing to the quality of education that they receive.
Thank you very much.